Welcome to the Enhanced Podcasts.
Today we're looking at a really interesting voter education program which explores where educational process is based on the voice of the learner and so democratizes the educational process, leading to a deeper connection with society. Our podcast today gets to the heart of this matter and looks at a unique voter education program run by a disability organization in Ireland, which is Rehab Group, with very strong collaboration with the Ireland's National Electoral Commission. And I'm very happy to say that the program went on to win a prestigious National Adult Education Award in the Learner Voice category. So congratulations already for this. With us today, we have Emer Costello, who is head of advocacy and campaigns with Rehab Group. Emer is a former Lord Mayor of Dublin and a former member of the European Parliament for Dublin. Then we have Hayley Keogh, a student from the National Learning Network, the Education and Training Division of Rehab Group. I actually first met Hayley when she took part in a study visit in Brussels at European Parliament to discuss the employment of people with disabilities. So I'm happy to have you again here on board. And last but not least, we have Art O'Leary, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Ireland's Electoral Commission. And maybe just a few words on the Electoral Commission, because maybe our audience doesn't really know what this is. The Electoral Commission has responsibility for a broad range of functions in the Irish electoral system, including working to increase public participation and awareness in the state's electoral and democratic processes through education and information programs. Before taking up the position with this Electoral Commission, Art developed a wealth of experience in the democratic institutions in Ireland, including Director of Parliamentary Committees in the Irish Houses of the Parliament, Secretary General to the Constitutional Convention and Citizens' Assemblies, and lastly, Secretary General to the President of Ireland. I hope I didn't forget anything about that. It was a long list.
That's perfectly right, and it explains why I'm so tired all the time, Greta. Yeah.
I understand. Okay, so to kick off this discussion, Emer, I would like to start with you. Could you give us maybe some background to Rehab's voter education program to walk us through the steps that brought you to the project?
Thanks, Greta, and lovely to be here on this podcast with you. Yes, so the voter education program came about primarily because when we looked at what was coming down the tracks in 2024 and 2025, we saw that there were 4 elections that were imminent. We had local and European elections in June 2024. We knew that a general election was imminent at some point, and it came in November 2024. And then there was a presidential election due, which took place in October 2025. So with all of this voting and the importance of advocacy and advocating for people with disabilities, our advocacy team decided to take a look at this and see what we could do in relation to voter education. And starting the process, one of our staff actually did the EACEA, which is the Adult Education Association here in Ireland, did a voter education programme with them and came back brimming with ideas after that. And her first idea, and probably her best idea, was to say, we have to bring the Electoral Commission to our National Advocacy Conference, and so we should invite Art. And we didn't know whether somebody as busy as Art would be able to come to our National Advocacy Conference. And we were absolutely thrilled when he said not only would the Electoral Commission be represented at our advocacy conference, but that he was coming in person because he wanted to meet us and he wanted to see us. And we were absolutely delighted with that. So as a result of Art's participation in our conference, there were so many questions and so many issues coming up that we thought we really needed to develop this programme more. And as I said, then we decided that we would run a set of voter education workshops across the country, and we would combine them then with education from the Electoral Commission, and we would run a series of webinars that would accompany that. And the whole focus of this programme was around the idea of self-advocacy for people with disabilities, that they would be able to identify what were the issues for them, what were the issues that were important to them, why should they vote, why does their voice matter, and how can we encourage people to participate in this, and so they are able to advertise for themselves. And by doing this, we were kind of trying to make sure that they used their own voices and that they could understand how much power they had. And I think one of the learners that we have with us today certainly proved to be a very powerful advocate for us.
Oh, yeah, I do agree on that. And that's an honorable goal to work toward, Emer, what you just said, especially when you hear directly from learners. It really gives you the satisfaction of knowing you're improving society voice by voice. So, Haley, I would like to go back to you now. As a learner, I'd like to hear your perspective on this. What does the learner voice, why does the learner's voice matter, in your opinion? What's your experience in that?
So from my own perspective, I've been involved in local advocacy structures since joining the National Learning Network. I'm a part of a local committee in Mullingar that brings student representatives together from 3 different campuses. And I really enjoy being part of that community of people. I'm proud to represent my class and to listen to other people and their perspectives. And I feel inspired by the people in my centre and in my class. And I think it supports the centre to make it a positive and inclusive environment for all. I'm also on our National Advocacy Committee and I'm currently the Vice Chairperson for the committee. So it's a powerful feeling to be part of a group of people who amplify the voice of people with disabilities. So at our annual National Advocacy Conference in 2024, as was said, Art was one of the keynote speakers on the voting process. And I found that workshop to be really interesting. So I felt really empowered and energized by Art's workshop. So following this, I attended a webinar that was hosted by Rehab Group with Art as the guest speaker once again. So encouraged by the National Advocacy Conference workshop, I joined this webinar and I wasn't disappointed. Art spoke on the importance of using your voice and the practical steps that are involved in voting. And even though I'd voted before, I had learned a lot. And then I had the knowledge to support my peers to engage with the conversation of voting. So I supported a number of my fellow students to register to vote, and this led to some great conversations on how important it is to have your say. And the following year, I also had the opportunity to share this experience during the EACEA Star Award judging panel, and it went really well, and it was great to play a part in it, and I'm thrilled to say that we won the category as well.
Wow, congratulations, Haley, on this. I must say that I'm not surprised by that. As you remember your speech at the Parliament, and I witnessed the power of your words firsthand. So I really have no doubts about that and what you can do in the future. Of course, of course. But Emer, is Haley's experience typical, or how the learners benefited from the program? What can you say about that?
Yeah, I think Haley is a brilliant ambassador for the program. And I think that, but there were many others as well who had similar experiences to Haley by participating in the programme. And they came back to us afterwards, people who would normally be very quiet. And I remember one guy, Dylan, actually saying, you know, like that on hearing some of the stories that were told at the workshops, at the voter education and advocacy workshops, that he started to realise that he could have a voice, and that he actually started to realise, and had never thought about it before, about how important his vote was. So what we did was we kind of divided it up into the workshops up into 2 parts. And as I say, it was so important to have the learner voice as part of the experience, because we wanted to know how the learners would benefit from the programme and what they would get out of it. So one of our staff who has a disability himself, he came along and he would talk about his experience and his journey through advocacy, and how important advocacy was to him, because he could have been in a situation where he wouldn't have been living independently, but because he got some help, but more importantly, because the help that he got helped to empower his voice, he actually is now in a position that he has a job, he's been able to move away from home, and that he was able to live a full and independent life. And that was so important. And I think a lot of people were really inspired to hear Padraig's story. So then we started to get people to think about, well, like, think about a time when somebody helped you speak up for yourself, or think about a time when you really wanted to speak. And just the wealth and the depth of the responses that came back, and we had post-it boards and we had all kinds of issues. So people were able to identify and then talk about the voter education process, be it the local elections, was really good, because that was about kind of issues that are coming up in your community. The general election were issues kind of facing people with disabilities generally, and what would they like to see the government to do. And that was really good. And the presidential election was also about, saying we want the president to know and understand who we are, and to be able to reflect some of our issues as well. So it was really, really good that we looked at it from that perspective. But the other thing we looked at, and it was important too for our collaboration with the Electoral Commission, was that we looked at the voting process and the procedure, and was it difficult, was it easy for people to get on the register? Was it difficult or easy for them to find their polling station? Could they vote when they got there? What were the obstacles? What were the issues that they were confronted with when they were thinking about the voting process? And I have to say, I was hugely enlightened by their insights on that. And I think Art can probably pick up on some of that.
Yeah, I mean, can I just say, I mean, I love to hear Hayley telling this story, because that's exactly what we try to do here, because in every election, your vote is your voice, and if you don't vote, then you allow somebody else to speak for you. And we need to just keep repeating that message, is that you have a very important voice. So please use it, because you have a story to tell. And it's all about storytelling for us. And Hayley captured it perfectly there. Maybe if I can just start at the very beginning, I mean, why this is important for the Electoral Commission. We've been studying, we're a young organisation, but for the last couple of years, we've been studying voters in this country. And more importantly, we've been studying people who don't vote. And in the last election that we had, 9% of people said they didn't vote because they had a disability. But a third of people said that they didn't vote because they didn't think politics was anything to do with them, that their single vote couldn't possibly make a difference, or that they didn't know who to vote for. So when we were planning these sessions with such an important audience to us, we try to answer all of those questions and try and help people make that connection between voting and elections and decisions that that affect their lives. And that's why the seminars with Rehab were so heartwarming for us, because such an engaged audience, and in the last couple of years with all the elections we've had, I've done hundreds of these events, and the Rehab events are in my top 3, because they're absolutely brilliant experiences, because the large crowds with lots of questions and curious minds, and they seem to take an awful lot out of it as well. So I'm astonished I get paid for doing this job. It was brilliant.
Wow, Emer, we're recording this, so you can listen to this back whenever you want.
I'm going to bottle that.
Yeah. Well, it's actually amazing to hear your description on the effects and the results of this program, because they highlight the efficiency that comes from putting the learners' needs at the very center. And this is helpful not only for them, for the learners, but also for policymakers, because it becomes a crucial compass when designing laws. So this is very inspiring to hear. I'd like to add maybe another key factor in strengthening and widening collaborations when we want to have a wider effect, a wider impact. So Hayley, back to you. What kind of a collaboration should we strengthen to establish to widen the impact on learners and society, especially in times of social and democratic challenges?
So for me, if I could share one piece of advice with policymakers, I think it would be to create a space where students feel safe and confident to share their opinions. I think having a culture of openness really matters, and I think our local committee provides that space. And I'm really lucky that the staff in our centre are supportive and they genuinely want to hear from their students. And I think we're also lucky that the organisation recognises the importance of having a student-led approach to education, and the importance of listening to the student experience and meeting the student where they are at on the level in that time. And I think open communication between learners and the policymakers is what makes a big difference. So our national advocacy structures have developed platforms for the voice of the student, which is really the voice of lived experience. So in recognizing the importance of and supporting the student's voice, I think it gives the strength and momentum to our students to raise their voice on the issues that matter to them. So it's given me a fantastic understanding of the importance and power of student voice.
Great, thank you, Haley. So now I'd like to direct your advice straight to the policymaker in the group. Art, what's your take on that?
Yeah, collaboration is really important for us. We're a small but ambitious organization, but with a lot of particular skills, but we can't do it by ourselves. You know, collaboration is hugely important. And as both Haley and Emer have mentioned, you know, the student at the center of this is really, really important. And in this country, we hear people with disabilities say all the time, nothing about us without us, you know, and the listeners to this podcast can't see me now here, but you're looking at me. I'm a man in a nice suit and a shirt and a tie. And when I turn up to speak at events, I'm really very funny and I'm engaging, but to deliver deep, sustainable change, people with disabilities and travelers, ethnic minorities and immigrants and all of these people who face barriers young people too, need to hear from people like themselves, you know. So it's so important that the students have a voice in the design of the messaging around programs and in the conduct of it. I mean, I love to be introduced by people with disabilities who own the program. And I come along, I bring the circus to town and say what I have to say and try and inform people. But the program is designed and owned by the people who use the rehab services. And I think that's absolutely key to everything.
Wow, that's music to our ears. Emer, I think you also might have a take on that since your
Yeah.
experience.
Well, I have a slightly different take to Art because even though he's dismissing himself as a man in a very nice suit, and it is a very nice suit, I know people can't see it, and it is, but I do actually think it is important as well to have the suits in the room, or for people to know and to understand that the suits are listening. And so that's why I think our collaboration has been really, really special, that Art comes along and he doesn't presume, and he comes along and he says, I want to hear, I want to listen. And he's also prepared then to see how can we make changes. And, you know, like he's come to our workshops, he's come to our webinars, people have asked him questions, they've put issues to him. And he goes off and he says, next election, now we're going to have a look at that. And next election, we're going to do this. So I think having the suits in the room and that collaboration there is hugely important, because it's only by doing that kind of collaboration can you influence and can you change policy. So we had a good balance. We had the voter education programs that were run with and by the people like Haley and the learners themselves on the one hand, but we also had the legitimacy and the stamp of approval from the Electoral Commission that said, give us your feedback.
We totally accept all of that. You know, we do have a part to play, and we're developing an education strategy, a formal education and public engagement strategy next year, which will specifically tailor different messages and different programs and initiatives for specific audiences, you know. And so people with disabilities are a very important group for us. You know, there are people who need to be encouraged all the time to vote, but our objectives here are really very simple, or perhaps they sound very simple. Everybody who's entitled to vote should be on our electoral register. Everybody should understand how to vote and how their vote works. And then at polling time, everybody should go and vote. So we're going to design with all of our key stakeholders a program that can deliver on all of those levels. And that's why it's important to us. Our education and public engagement program between now and our next elections in 2029 will be the greatest priority for me as Chief Executive of the Electoral Commission, because our job now is to engage people so they can make that connection between voting and decisions that affect their lives.
You said something that struck with me, because you said that it might sound very simple, but indeed it doesn't have to be complicated to be impactful, right? And
Yeah,
sometimes
yeah.
we don't understand this. We miss the target because of that. It's true, definitely. I like to say on this exact point, Emer, going back to you, I would like to dig a bit deeper into this thought. Given your strong commitment to democracy throughout your career, it will be very interesting for our listeners to hear your perspective on the subtle link between education and politics. How would you describe it? Because it's sometimes very difficult to grasp it.
Oh yeah, Greta. Well, education is just so important, because it unlocks so much potential in people. Like it really shapes your political awareness. It shapes your participation in your community. It shapes how people understand government, their own rights, and so many different issues that affect them. And so, like, education is really related. It is completely related to any kind of political engagement or disengagement, really, because sometimes you find that people who are disengaged is because there is a lack of education. And I think that this is kind of what you're talking about with the voter education program there as well. But kind of, from voting to being an activist to kind of understanding the democratic institutions, it's really important. And when I talk about education, I mean it in the broadest sense, like in the formal, non-formal, informal sense. And I think, like, we all know about how empowering education is, that it equips you, the learner, with the skills that they need to examine the policies and the skills that they value to determine who would best represent them. And like, they need that kind of critical thinking. And it's really only education can bring something, can give people those type of skills. Before I worked for Rehab, I actually worked for another organisation called the Irish Development Education Association. And that's where I first came across the EACEA as well, Greta, because I worked with your colleague David on global citizenship education programs. And we talked about global citizenship education, about the importance of knowing and understanding the root causes of injustice in the world, and how as citizens we can work to affect change. And that's really around the importance of global citizen education and understanding how to promote kind of a better and a more sustainable a more sustainable world. And it goes back then as well to the Sustainable Development Goals, which some of your listeners might be familiar with, in terms of just making the world a better place. And, the idea was with the Sustainable Development Goals that we would do this by 2030. But the fourth Sustainable Development Goal, SDG4, was around education. And there was one of the kind of targets in that was specifically around education for sustainable development and making sure that learners had the knowledge to be able to promote human rights, gender equality, understand intercultural education, non-violence, and just appreciate cultural diversity. And I think that is something that is so important for future citizens. And that has to be what education is about at the end. And that is the link between politics and civic engagement and education. They're all very much interdependent and intertwined.
Thank you for this very direct link and for bringing up the SDG 4.7 especially. It's important to remind everyone that the actions created at the grassroots level can also be supported and encouraged at the international level as well. Can you think maybe of other initiatives where the learner's voice made a difference? Haley, if you're okay with that, I will go with you first.
So for me, I could think of two particular instances when I think about how my voice and the voice of the student made a difference. So I was asked to be interviewed as part of the Ain't Star Awards, as I had previously mentioned. And in that room, sitting alongside the staff who had delivered the voter education programme, my testimony was just as important as theirs. The judges asked me many questions about my experience and what it had meant to me. And this was quite a powerful moment for me. And another standout moment was that a delegation of us travelled to the European Parliament to talk about the importance of and the barriers to employment for people with disabilities. And this is where I met you, Greta. We spoke to a captive audience made up of MEPs, representatives from the European Commission and the European Council and the Irish Parliament. So it was really enlightening to engage with people and to see the importance of influencing policymakers and other key influencers.
Thank you so much, Haley. Emer, maybe you want to add on this because I think that your experience can.
Thanks, Greta. I'm not quite sure what I can add to that. I think Haley has actually just spoken wonderfully there, you know, about the difference, and particularly the voter education program. And it was so wonderful because the whole experience with the voter education program was that it was like a kind of a ripple effect, you know, like we invited Art to our conference, and then we were having voter education programs. Then all of a sudden, one of my colleagues said, we have this opportunity to apply for funding. Will you apply for lottery funding and go to the European Parliament? And we suddenly thought, wow, yes, we will. Then people who didn't have the opportunity to go to the European Parliament said, but we didn't have the opportunity to go to the European Parliament. So we said, okay, we'll see what we can do. And we brought a group of people up to the Irish Parliament, and we organised kind of workshops for them within the Irish Parliament. So it's just this whole ripple effect that the voice of the learner just keeps directing us and moving us. You know, like we never envisaged that this is where we would go. We never envisaged about winning the Star Award, and we didn't actually envisage the impact that that would have on us. And maybe one of the other important things Art mentioned there, the voter education and public engagement program that they're doing. As a result of all of this and the engagement that he had with Rehab, and because we're such fun people, Art actually asked me to get involved in it and to go on to one of the working groups. And that for me was an amazing experience as well. But we were continuing with our voter education programs. So it was really useful because I could actually develop and bring the voice of the learner back to that particular forum, which is, I know, going to shape the work that Art does over the next 4 years. So like that's something that where the learner voice is really directly influencing what's happening.
And maybe I can add to that, perhaps as well. You know, nothing succeeds like success, you know, and for every election, we try at the Electoral Commission to make sure that it's better than the election that went before it. You know, so we've had 4 or 5 elections in the last 18 months or so, and every single one has allowed us the opportunity to finesse our messaging, to finesse the delivery, to design a campaign a little bit different to reach groups and people who haven't yet engaged. And this is where the learner's voice becomes so important for us, you know, at a strategic level, you know, because we learn a lot from campaigns and we make sure that the next campaign is much better. But at a practical level, can I just say, you know, the reason I like the Rehab event so much is because of the questions. I try not to speak very much and get to the Q&A part as quickly as I can, because they're often amazing, you know. And so the questions that the people who use the service ask are very important to us because we put them on our website. You know, they are frequently asked questions section of our website is hugely informed by questions that we get. So people ring and ask us questions all the time, but there's so much rich material out there in engaging with communities, people who struggle to engage and make that connection, that we'd be lost without them. So Haley and all her colleagues, they should know that every time they ask a question that is interesting, we say, well, listen, there are probably many people who need to know the answer to this question as well. So it informs campaigns in real time as they're going along, and then in a longer, more strategic way, it will inform the way we deliver messages to all kinds of groups in the future.
Wow, that's amazing. We'll invite our learners and our listeners to go on the website and to see the Q&A, because I think it's very interesting for them as well. So hearing you talking about this, how can we actually build on that experiences to strengthen the collaboration? Because this is a very key question. Maybe Art, you would like to go first?
Yeah, I mean, the idea, like I mentioned earlier, you know, every single campaign was a learning experience for us. You know, every day is a school day, and we have to treat it as such. And all of that experience leads into our formal education and public engagement program for next year, where we will formalize these links. We'll formalize collaboration, we'll formalize partnerships, we'll formalize funding, And we'll do that with a whole series of very strategic objectives. But ultimately, what we're trying to achieve is to get people who experience barriers or experience difficulties engaged in the democratic process. So we do whatever we have to do to make sure that happens. And we can't do it by ourselves for all the reasons I spoke about earlier, which is why it's really, really important that we have engaged stakeholders like Rehab Group and like travelers groups and immigrants and young people and all of these groups as well, people who have this distance with the democratic process. So I'm putting great store in our formal education strategy from next year, because I'll go and seek funding to match all of our ambitions in that regard.
Can I maybe just add to that as well? Much and All as art is wonderful and is absolutely amazing. The great thing about the Electoral Commission is that art works with a really, truly amazing team of people who are kind of working very busily away on the various different programs and under arts guidance. And I think that is hugely important. And like over the last kind of 2 years as well, like we've built up a close collaboration, not just with art, but with the education office here and with the staff here. And there's a kind of a mutual trust and collaboration there. And if there are issues, like they can come to us, or if we have if we need assistance, we can go to them. And like they have produced the most amazing voter education materials, you know, on registering to vote, on the voting process, on how, you know, like how to make sure that you do kind of maximize the power of your vote. And all of that is hugely important. So these kind of partnerships and collaborations, they happen because of the people behind them, and that's really important. And it's also really important that Art and his team get the funding that they need to be able to develop those kind of collaborations, because that is hugely important. If they don't have funding to do this work, then we're kind of back at square one.
Yeah, and I should have mentioned the team before now, so I'm glad you raised it, Emer. But we're a new organization, and we have a lot of people with very diverse skills in this organization. But the one thing that they all have in common is they've got a fire in their belly about democracy, about elections. And we jump out of bed every morning genuinely believing that we can make a difference, you know, to people's lives. And that's all, you know, so nobody's allowed to come to work for us unless they tick all of those boxes. And so the recruitment doesn't happen by accident. We genuinely sought out people who can genuinely make a difference. So it's brilliant. It's the privilege of my life to lead this team because they're an extraordinary group of people. And we genuinely believe that by the time the next elections come around in 2029, we should see a transformation in the numbers of people who vote, the kinds of people who vote. We'll try and remove as many barriers as we can and try and enhance the electoral process to the greatest extent that we can as well.
Thank you for listening to this episode, and we will be waiting for you in the next episodes of the series. Until next time, goodbye. The music of the Enhanced Podcasts is a creation of Jason Farad and the Urban Nomadic Productions.